A lot of young people are fearful. They are anxious because it's like, why am I then born? How can I plan for a future if everyone tells me that everything is coming to an end very soon? So for us in Africa, it's even more peculiar because we see the impacts. Africa is, known to experience the impact of the climate crisis even more profusely than other regions. So young people, particularly those who experience this direct impact, are very fearful. They're very worried and they're anxious of what a future could look like.
Our conversation today focuses on climate, culture, and mental health. How African youth are turning climate anxiety into action. Joining me to have this conversation is Jennifer Uchendu-Kalu, a climate change and mental health advocate, founder of Susty Vibes, and creator of the Eco Anxiety Africa project. She stands at the forefront of this movement. What began as a blog, Simplifying Sustainability, has evolved into one of Africa's most influential youth-led climate movements, using music, storytelling, research, and community engagement to make climate action relatable and emotionally sustainable. Her work uniquely bridges climate science and mental health, ensuring that Africa's climate response is not only practical, but humane. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome to Just Africa.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me today.
Yes. How you doing? How is the climate around you there? How is the weather? How are you doing generally?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank God.
All right, so many people think climate change is only environmental. So once they hear climate, it's environmental. How does it become a mental health issue?
Absolutely. If we think about it, the weather, the environment, and our life support system really affects how we think of our day to day and our lives. When you experience a flood issue, you're not excited about it. You don't just go to your life like normal. And so the work that I do looks at how environmental problems, whether it's pollution, whether it's flooding, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's a storm, how does it affect the day-to-day person as they cope through and try to adapt through, whether it's their day or come back and bounce back. So think of a family that has historically known a place as their home and they have to deal with displacement as a result of flooding. That you don't go through that sort of experience and feel okay. So my work looks at the experience psychologically and how people are able to be resilient, or the lack of, and how they can bounce back basically. So I hope that paints a good picture of how this is really important.
Yes, it does paint a very beautiful picture. So, if I may ask, I'll come back to what you said earlier, but I want to know, how does climate anxiety show up among African youth?
Absolutely. I had done this work for about 3 to 5 years, working with young people, and then I realized that the more we know about the climate crisis, the more we understand the complexity, the enormity, and how overwhelming this reality is. The fact that constantly the news and science research tells us that the years we have to make a change is shrinking. A lot of young people are fearful. They are anxious because it's like, why am I then born? How can I plan for a future if everyone tells me that everything is coming to an end very soon? So for us in Africa, it's even more peculiar because we see the impacts. Africa is, known to experience the impact of the climate crisis even more profusely than other regions. So young people, particularly those who experience this direct impact, are very fearful. They're very worried and they're anxious of what a future could look like. And then for many people, they might not even experience the direct impact, but just connected on social media, just knowing everything about the climate crisis, it is a cause for alarm, and it's very normal, it's very healthy, it's something that is to be expected. You cannot keep hearing that your house is about to burn and you won't
I
feel a
see.
set,
Okay.
a
Yeah.
sort of way. So that is the work that I do.
How do we overcome this fear? Because they say that even when you stay fearful, the circumstance comes to you faster than expected. Now, and people, this fear has caused some persons mental health issues. So, how do you encourage Africans or youth to overcome this particular fear?
Sure, that is such a great question. I think it's about safeguarding it because we need to first understand that the fear and concern means that you're in touch with the reality. You're not denying that there isn't a climate crisis happening in Africa, which we see in some parts. And so, what to do with that fear is to be part of spaces where you can confidently and courageously talk about how you're feeling. Some of the things that we've done at Susty Vibes and the Eco Anxiety Africa project is to create the space for a lot of young people to be free to talk about how they are feeling, to say, I'm not okay, I'm worried about this, I'm seeing my environment change, and this is a cause of concern. And then having, after you've created that space, then you need to take action. You need to be part of the solution in some way, whether little or big, whether it's in tree planting, whether it's to go to clean up. It is important. Research and evidence has shown us that the antidote to anxiety and fear is actually taking action, but not taking action from a place of silence or being as an individual, but as part of a community, as part of a group where you see other people who also feel the same thing as you are, and you're all taking action together. You're doing what you can, and you're holding governments accountable because that is very, very key. The work about climate action needs urgent political will, where there's governments who are, prioritizing their people and looking at how, climate action needs to be improved. So I think for me, it's really about creating space and then taking action, backed by accountability measures, basically.
All right, thank you very much, Jennifer. So there's something when it comes to Africa, Nigeria, there's something related with this mental health. So when people hear the word mental health, the first thing that comes to mind is that this person is going nuts. This person is about running mad. This person is not normal. So that is how people have seen mental health. So when you're not telling someone, an African telling you or another person that the climate change or the climate anxiety is causing me a mental health issue, people begin to wonder, what are you talking about? So for an average African on the street that does not understand what mental health is, how do you break it down to that person that this is the meaning of mental health? Not even linking it to climate right now. Just make it easy and simple for that person to understand.
Sure, that is such a good question. And I think the work that we do, while we know, when we come to spaces, we're able to talk about the technicality. At the end of the day, when we talk to average people, it's really, are you okay? Are you feeling like you have control of your life? We talked to someone who had a barbing salon, for example, and he had his entire house submerged by flooding. He would never come out to tell people, I have a mental health issue because of the flooding that happened. But we know he's not okay. We know that he struggled through that experience because he told us, for example, how his entire certificates were submerged in the floods, and he's thinking, how do I bounce back from this? So it's those kind of conversations. When you experience something like this, how are you feeling? Are you okay? We talk about well being. as just the basic introduction to come to it. If people say that they're not okay, and of course, there's a broader context of mental health issues being stigmatized, not being prioritized in a place like Nigeria. But we know that we're often not okay. We know that we're often stressed out. We know that the condition of the environment, whether socially, politically, and economically, impacts us on a day-to-day basis. And we talk about this, but we talk about it often from a place of frustration and not putting out the frame of, well, this could be causing you mental stress. This could be causing you, some sort of mental health impact that causes you to think about yourself in a very low way, that makes you withdraw sometimes, and that makes you frustrated and fearful. So when we take out mental health, because it can be too technical, we're just asking, how are you feeling? And do you feel in control of your life? Do you feel like you know what you're doing? And do you feel like you can, be sane, you can be happy? Do you have a sense of community? Are you coping well? Are you adapting well to everything that is happening around you? And then we can start to have the conversation
Yeah.
when you've been able to answer that honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer. I love the fact that you're always talking about having the conversation around mental health. Here, someone once told me some time ago that most times when they ask you, how are you? Of course, there is an expected answer, I'm fine. So, but then go ahead and ask the person, are you happy? So, when we talk about conversation, are there cultural factors that make conversations about mental health more difficult in African communities?
Absolutely. It is
Okay.
stigmatized, as I mentioned. People are often looked a set of way. They are often criticized when they talk about not feeling okay. And so what we've tried to do at the Eco Anxiety Africa project is to bridge these conversations in different ways. Where, for example, in local communities, recently we had events in Abia State, in Abuja, and in Lagos. And we went into our villages and we went into our community and we said, how do these conversations happen in the past? And this design of something called Oku, where people gather, whether it's with their grandmothers, whether it's with their uncles, having that intergenerational bridge. And in those spaces, historically, people have often used those spaces to talk about their grievances, the things that they are not okay with, the things that they've wondered how their elders have coped with. And so we've brought climate conversation into those spaces where people now gather with their elders and they talk about the things they see in the environment and they are wondering, how is this okay? This is a struggle for us, this is impacting us. And so it's really about conversation, but we need to make spaces that are very structured, that have the integrity and sanctity to make a change. When we go back to our history in Nigeria, those spaces when people come together, whether it's in a village meeting, whether it's a landlord and a tenant, those spaces acknowledge the power dynamics, and we create that facilitation that says it's okay to talk about how you're feeling right now. It's okay to talk about how this is impacting you, particularly
Okay.
on a psychological level. So those are the things that come up, and people, of course, talk about finances, employment, and how these issues impact them and their ability to thrive.
All right, Jennifer. So your profile says you use music, storytelling, culture, everything to pass the message of climate change. Now, when we talk about storytelling, most times people assume it has to be very interesting, it has to have so much morals, and so on and so on and so on. How do you use culture? How do you use music to pass this message? Do you do Tales by Moonlight and pass the message? How do you do it? Just tell us about it.
Sure. I mean, for us, pop culture has been a very big way to influence narrative, infrastructure, the way people just think about the way the world works. We've used dance, we've used music to
Okay?
introduce conversations, basically, to say, well, if somebody is frustrated about the state of the Niger Delta as a result of the pollution, they'll often put it in a song. We have that from Burna Boy, for example, and there are lots of examples. And so we explore this music. We explore different angles where people have expressed not just how they feel, but things that they're dissatisfied with, things that they would like to see. Art and culture helps us to imagine a better world. It's that bridge where we can all come together and relate. Everyone can nod their heads to a really nice tune. But if we pay attention to what the lyrics is saying, then it causes us to pause and think, well, this is true. This is something that we haven't paid attention to. So for us, it's been a way to bring people together, particularly young people who live in urban areas. They want to come together. They're very full of passion. They like the idea of vibes. So we have used pop culture a lot, this idea of film, this idea of parties to come together where we're all excited and joyful, because it's really important to have these very difficult conversations within joyful spaces. And then we can push a path forward. We don't just want to come and complain and lament. We want to say, what can we do about how we are feeling? How
Okay,
can we take
Jennifer.
action?
Yes, talking about using dance, using music, and art and culture generally to pass this message. Now, many people view art and culture as entertainment. They don't see the important side of it. So when you use it to pass information, use it, don't you think that the people feel they just go away with the entertainment aspects and forget the main message of the whole performance? Don't you think that happens a lot?
Well, I mean, it depends on how it's curated. And we've done this for 10 years now. So we understand how, these things can be used as tools, not to be distracted. It's a medium to bring people together. If you come for a Susty Vibes movie screening, for example, the movie that we screen will be telling you about the issues. We'll be telling you about, the environment. We'll be telling you about the climate crisis or biodiversity loss or whatever issue. And then we're going to talk about solutions. We're going to have a panel session, for example. In the past, we've actually used humor. We've worked with comedians like forever, and to talk about climate crisis, because these things bring people together. When we have at least brought them together, then we can now start talking about the issues. For us, arts and culture have been a medium to first bring people together. It's been that common ground that we can all relate to. Then we can then start talking about the important issues.
All right, so let's talk a little about you. What first drew you into the intersection of climate change and mental health? You.
Sure, that is a great question. I felt extremely frustrated and overwhelmed myself as a climate activist. It is from my own personal experience that I decided to do something about how I felt. And I thought to myself, if I know so much about climate change and I feel so overwhelmed and discouraged, there has to be other young people who feel this too. And that is how the conversation started, inviting other people to say, I'm not feeling okay. This is very stressful, even though I'm doing this all this work. But it's very frustrating to know that you can plant a tree, in a place like Nigeria, and a few years down the line, it's going to be cut down because of some capital project. So it's very frustrating. And the more I talked about it, the more young people reached out to say, we feel this too. We didn't have an idea that this is a name. We didn't have an idea that there are names for all of these things. And so the work that I did with Susty Vibes really helped open up that light bulb moment for more young people to have conversations about how they're feeling.
So are you saying that Solstice Vibes was created for just this, about just to have this conversation on climate change, mental health, and anxiety?
Absolutely not. When Sustainable
Okay.
started, we started to make sustainability fun, actionable, relatable, and cool. And that's what we did for a couple of years. But when I started to feel, this sort of mental health impact as a result of the work, and I knew that other young people were feeling it, we started something called the Eco Anxiety Africa Project. So
Yeah.
that is our project within Susty Vibes that is focused on climate change and mental health, where we're doing a lot of research, trying to find out the evidence. what does it mean for an African to be impacted on a mental level about the climate crisis, and what can we do about it? So the broader Susty Vibes remains to do a lot of our advocacy and community action, while we have this branch of our work that really looks at anxiety and climate and mental health issues.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. And we appreciate everything that you are doing for yourself, for Survive, and for everyone around you. So, why did you choose creativity, pop culture, and community as tools instead of the traditional environmental advocacy method, the normal advocacy where people say come out, oh, plant a tree, go to radio, go to this? Why did you choose culture as tool?
Sure. I think for me, pop culture came to mind immediately when I was founding Susty Vibes, because I thought about the ways to invite the regular person, the everyday person to this conversation, because these are the people that the climate crisis impacts on a day to day. How do we invite everyone to the conversation? And pop culture is amazing. When we use humor, when we use art, when we use our movies, we can bring something that everyone can relate to. And I think for me, it was more important that we do not continue advocacy in the way that is done traditionally, because we haven't achieved so much when we think about it in using those methods. So I
Okay.
wanted to disrupt the conversation where there's more young people. There's young people who typically are known as millennials and Gen Zs now coming together for the climate crisis, and not the typical, oh, this is something that the people who like environmental issues just come to. So it's now a conversation that brings everybody on board. And that's what, pop culture helped us do.
Okay, so what is that one thing, one achievement that you were able to push out? That thing with this climate change, climate anxiety, what's that one success story that pop culture helped you to achieve?
Absolutely. We have a lot of success stories. We've had very exciting campaigns, whether it's our community trees project we had a few years ago, planting trees in Lagos and Abuja. I think for me, our success stories that we've built a formidable community, a community of young people who are now going out to do really exciting things, who are starting their own non-profits, they're starting their own organizations, they are within corporate spaces, and they're advancing sustainability issues. When I started Susty Vibes 10 years ago, I was literally clamoring for opportunity. I kept saying that young people have a lot to offer within the sustainability and climate movement, and they should be given the opportunity. And when those opportunities didn't exist, we started to create them. Now we see a lot of young people involved in climate issues in Nigeria and Africa. And it's really because of a lot of the work that we had done, a couple of years ago, again, along with many other really impactful organizations. So our success story is that we have flipped the narrative that young
Okay.
people can and should be part of leading sustainability issues in Nigeria.
Okay, so earlier you talked about research. That's one thing Sustivide does and all that. So the question is, with all the research you've done, how many of them have you been able to implement, or maybe submitted to a government agency or anything? But of all the researches you've carried out, how many have been implemented, and maybe you're actually seeing the results are there?
Sure, that is a great question. I think for us, research has been able to give us the evidence and proof that there is a problem. It gives us the data and the number of what exactly people are feeling and how they would like an action to go with it. One example is the work we do with our Zen cafes and conversations. It was through research that we understood that young people are not only experiencing the impact of the climate crisis on the psychological level, but they need space for it. And so we brought out, the Zen Cafe, where people can come together and learn about the issues. It was through research that we found out that by inviting elders to the conversation, we're creating a soft landing for a lot of young people to share their experiences, and they can get wisdom and support. And so we've invited our, intergenerational support. And so we have initiatives that bring elders and young people together to have conversations on how to move forward. It was through research that we realized that you can't have this conversation without the government. And so research helped us to invite governments into our spaces to say, this is what we found out. One example is a project we called Mecca, and Mecca was going around parts of Lagos in particular to find out how people understand climate risks. And we invited the Lagos government, for example. We said, look at the things that we found out. How does this tally with the work that you've done? And what is a way forward? And in those conversations, the government is able to tell us, well, we're doing this, well, we need help in this way, we need advocacy in this way, we need people to work with us in this manner. And it's been a very interesting way to translate whatever we find on the field into things that everybody can relate to. So for us, research actually informs the evidence and the projects that we create. Our solutions are often research based. They come from everything we've heard from the actual people who are experiencing the issues.
Okay, so would you say that the government has done enough when it comes to climate change, climate and mental health conversations? Would you say the government, people have done more than enough?
Oh no, we haven't even scratched the surface. We
Okay.
aren't, unfortunately, treating the climate crisis and related problems as a core priority. We often have the policies, we often have the good intention, but we don't follow through. As with many other issues in public health, in education in Nigeria. So, unfortunately, the climate crisis and the environment has been one that has been relegated for too long. And we see the impact when we see public health outbreaks, when we see disease outbreak. When you trace it, it looks, we come back to how has this, country really looked at the environment? How has it prioritized environmental issues and protecting the lives of citizens? Unfortunately, we know that there's a long way to go. While there are things happening here and there in a couple of states, there's so many areas where these priorities have not been, have not been actioned, and they've not been treated as urgent. So no, Nigeria is not on track, in terms of active and urgent climate action.
Okay, so what would you tell the government to start right now? Like this very minute, Lagos State, Nigeria, Africa generally, this is what we need to do to have a better environment, to save whatever we need to save. What should I say, one or maybe five or whatever number it is? What would you tell them to do right now?
I think it starts from a mindset that these environmental actions are not just tick boxes to be done, right? They're things that actually impact people. This is about our children's future. And so really for the government, some of them are more advanced than the others. We need to be able to learn from each other, and we need to have a national vision on where we're going, particularly places like Nigeria. What is the national climate vision? How much do people know about it? Our goals, for example, what are the things that we'd like to achieve, and how can we all work together? What is the government doing, for example, to educate citizens and so that we can all work in partnership? Vision, I think, is really important because it helps us get in line. It helps us get information, basically. A good example is litter culture and circular economy. We see a lot of plastics in our gutters, we see it in our landfills, we see it in our oceans. When we have a national vision and goal to say we want to tackle this problem, Rwanda did it really nicely, where there is a law and policy that is happening on a national level. And I know there's a lot of work being done, for that in Nigeria, but we're seeing more states going further than the others. We need everyone to be able to catch up, and you do that through policy, but policy that is implemented, policy that works hand in hand with people, where schools, teachers, parents, corporate organizations, everybody's on board because they know that this is important. And people aren't doing this just to get tax incentive or just to tick a box or just to get a political win. They're doing this because they know that this is important. They know that plastic pollution, for example, is already impacting our health in significant levels. Research has shown us that there's plastic in our blood, there's plastic in many parts of our body. And so the government needs to take this evidence and turn it into action where there is a law or a regulation that governs the way that plastic pollution is managed. So this is just one example that can translate into other climate issues. But I think ultimately it's a vision that everybody can get him on board with.
Okay, so talking about advocating for a cleaner environment, you talked about schools, you talked about home, you mentioned them rather. So when you say schools, at what level should we start? Should we go straight to secondary school or the university, or we have to start from the very, very beginning, the foundation of it? Where would you advise the campaign starts from?
Well, I think it needs to start from the very basics and foundation. Young people, particularly children, need to be taught what right living looks like. What does it mean to grow up in a world that prioritizes the environment, basically? So these things need to be incorporated in their mindset, in their ideals. They need to know, for example, that it's not okay to just throw a plastic on the floor. And they need to know why, and when they grow with it, it becomes something that they can't be caught doing as adults. And I think for us it's really important when we go to schools, when we talk to children, when we talk to young people in secondary schools, you'll find that it's easier to convince a younger child while this is important than a person that is in secondary school who is just already normalized, who knows that, well, this is just something that we're used to. So it's really important to catch them young and catch them as young as possible so that this becomes a mindset that they grow with. Again, non-profits, organizations can only do what they can. It comes back to that idea of a national vision. Is this something that everybody knows across the country? And are we doing something about it in advocacy and in action where we can all get behind, one single policy that governs the way that we see the environment?
Okay, so Jennifer, thank you so much for your insight. But I want to ask, what gives you hope when the climate conversation feels overwhelming?
Sure, that is such a beautiful question. Thank you. And I want to stress that I don't always feel hopeful. There are days where I'm extremely discouraged about everything that's going. But I think I felt very hopeful seeing not just the young people within the Susty Vibes community just going on and doing stuff, but it's been around how the ecosystem in Nigeria has changed in the last 5 to 6 years. Now
Okay.
there are more young people in the conversation. There are people doing work on biodiversity. There are people doing work, in different environmental issues. And that has been hopeful to see that young people still believe that we can make a change and they're doing everything that they can. People are writing books, people are creating different sections and they're using this digital media and social media to really reach people. And I think it's something that, should make us hopeful to say the future generations, and young people in particular see the problem and we're not just taking a step back. We're doing the best, we're showing up and we're taking action. For me, that gives me a lot of hope.
I like that. That is, yeah, finding something that really keeps you going. That could be hopeful, You know that things will get better someday or somehow. So, to a young, I know you'll be dealing with so many young people. So you've said that so many times. You'll be dealing with them. But there are some young people who still don't see the need or who don't even know how to go about it. Yes, they want to lend their voices, add to the course and say, okay, let's take this course to the next level. But they don't know how to go about it. Some don't even know the left from the right. So, to a young lady particularly, because you're a lady, to to a young lady and a young guy out there who are still finding their feet, trying to navigate through life, what is your word of advice for them right now as they are watching you?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I would say I was you a couple of years ago where I see the problem. I want to be part of the solution, but I have no idea where to start. For some people, they might need to join communities and look for like minded people. Now, there's so many of them, whether it's Susty Vibes, other initiatives, Plug in Nigeria, that have now come up to really create environments where people of like passions can come together. So I advise those young people to find ways to join those communities. But if you can't join the communities, you need models, you need solutions, and you need ideas that can inspire you to maybe start one within your community, bring people together, talk about these issues, and look for creative ways to take action. And it's really important that you do that and you don't just, stay stuck in planning. Do something. Go to a school, for example, talk about it with your friends. That's how we take action.
Okay, so before I let you go, how is the community reception when it comes, when you go to places, to some of these rural areas? How is the reception like? Do they welcome you when you come to tell them about the challenges that you are facing? How do they welcome you?
Sure, that's a great question. So we don't just go into communities to say, "Oh, we like the environment, want to do something about it." We would often find influential people within the community to first, help us convince them to be part of what
Okay.
we're doing. So it could be the community chief, it could be the priest or the religious leaders. That has been our route into communities. Find out who the influential person is. I remember, for example, when we wanted to have a cleanup in Ikorodu, we had to go through the Iyaloja and the market women, the leaders of the market, and we explained to them what we want to do. We explained to them how we're introducing this idea of taking care of the environment and incentive-based recycling. It was once we got their buy-in that we then had, a safe environment to work with, and they were able to help us, galvanize other people within the market area to listen to us and to be part of the initiative, basically. So you often need to find someone who is really influential, who can, catalyze action, basically, within the community.
Do they ask you for money when you go there? Do they ask you to make payments?
More often than none, yes. And we actually plan for this within our, projects. We plan for incentives. How do we get people? Because we know that we're doing this within a broader context of economic hardship. So how do we get these conversations going? Do we need to give people gifts so that they see, something to help them remember that this is something that they've done? With research, we try not to give actual cash, like direct cash,
Okay.
but oftentimes we've had to do that. We've had to create funds, for example, for people who have been impacted by whether it's flooding or whether it's an issue, because at the end of the day, people will not eat environmental advocacy. They want something that they can take home with. They want something that would help them, think about tomorrow and they can bounce back. So yes, we have incorporated incentives to our work so that people feel like they're gaining something, whether it's both technically and mentally, but also economically.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for coming on Just Africa today. We really appreciate your insights, and we hope that when we call on you next time, you'll be available for us, right?
Absolutely, I will be. Thank you so much.
Okay, but before I let you go, of course, your name depicts where you're from. We understand that you're from the eastern part of Nigeria, even though you are not in Nigeria right now. And we still appreciate that. So you're going to use your, okay, so what part of the east, okay, which of the states did you come from?
I'm from Abia State.
Okay, so you use Igbo to, or is there a particular dialect apart from the general Igbo that we know?
No, it's Igbo.
Okay, so you're going to speak Igbo, and tell your fans, your teammates, your staff, anyone, everyone, your family. You're going to say hello to them in Igbo language because this is Just Africa, and you're going to tell them to keep watching Sook News Television and, of course, subscribe to the Just Africa show. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay. Hello to we're watching I Just Africa. Achọrọ subscribe, leha lemenga, ọdịmma, ohe kwesịrị, ihe anyị kwesịrị inwete.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yes, they got the message, I believe. Once again, Jennifer, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
And you too. Climate change is not just an environmental crisis, just like Jennifer said. It is emotional. It is cultural. It is deeply human. But across Africa, youth are proving something powerful. Anxiety does not have to end in paralysis. It can begin with purpose, through community, through creativity, through advocacy, through innovation. It could be anything. They're turning fear into fuel, pressure into policy conversations, pain into poetry, worry at work. The message is clear. Protecting the planet must also include protecting the minds of those fighting for it. To every young person carrying climate concerns quietly, you are not alone. Your feelings are valid and your voice matters. This is Just Africa, where we don't just talk about the crisis, we spotlight the courage rising within it.